Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever. And today I'm actually checking out the very first figure from the brand new core series of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Now, keep in mind, if this doesn't look necessarily familiar to you as an incarnation of He-Man, that's alright. It has just started on Netflix a few days ago. And for a little while, they're going to be Walmart exclusive, maybe for about a month it seems. And these were available as kind of a blind buy on Walmart's website. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of ordering 4, thinking surely I would get all 3 in the first series, but alas, they gave me a case of solid He-Man, so here I am. So looking at the front, this is definitely a new style of packaging for Masters than what we've seen before. You can see that we have just He-Man sitting there in the bubble card. This is a much more visually appealing version of packaging for Masters than what we saw with the Revelation packaging, or the Masterverse packaging. And I really think it does look good. You can see that we have a graphic from the show at the top, a little thing about Netflix, and then down here we have a Power Attack blurb, all about how he has some action features, which it's funny, as I've noted before, this is apparently the same copyright Mattel has retained for all these years from their Batman toys. Around the time that The Dark Knight Rises came out, they were calling them Power Attack. Oddly enough, we still have the bizarre barcode right there on the front. And then down at the bottom, there's nothing, which usually there's something to cover that up. So that's kind of funny. That's just transparent. On the back, we have some photography there of He-Man. It shows you some action features and things. The render of the figure looks a little different than the actual final figure that we got, particularly the head sculpt. It kind of alleviated a little bit of this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, like a ventriloquist dummy stare that He-Man has. Instead of names, because this is a multilingual packaging, you can see that we have Skeletor and Man-at-Arms, but they have these funny little codes under them. This was the sticker that Walmart put on here. I'm not sure if it actually matches what's under there, you can see. So maybe this will help you out if you're needing a barcode. And here's our brand new core He-Man figure right out of the packaging. Now there's a few things that's worth pointing out about this guy before we go any further. This is more of the 5.5 inch scale of figure, and it's meant to be more in line with the size of the original He-Man toys. It's a little bit bigger, but it's definitely not meant to be the larger ones that we've seen images of. Those are like 8.5 inches or 8 inches or so. So these are kind of the smaller, cheaper, more basic ones with more basic articulation and action features. So first things first, we'll just look at some of the sculpted detail. I do think that it is a dead ringer for the show. Everything we've seen from the Netflix series, I think that this is a really good match. Particularly the head sculpt, I think, must have been taken from, or at least I assume, and this is a compliment to the sculptors if it's not the case, but I do believe this figure is pretty much just taken from a render from the actual CGI show. And I do think that this is just a direct transfer from the series, which is kind of cool when you think about it, because nowadays kids can literally own the characters, or at least the digital art assets of the characters. So that's kind of a cool thought. You can see that there's lots of, aside from the head, things get a little less traditional as we go down. He reminds me quite a bit of the DC Comics armor that He-Man wore from several years back, because there was more of a chest piece on that, and he has more of a tank top here. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I really like what the design team came up with for He-Man's new logo, because it's meant to look like the power sword with the 2 halves, but it also looks like an H, and it does kind of put you in the mind of an Iron Cross just a little bit. You can see that with He-Man's Techno Vest, as they called it, I guess, in the old mini comics, that you have these kind of like straps that go all the way to the back. You can see that I have a power sword, and you can plug it in. I'll just take it out so you can see the sculpted detail on the back there. I like how the kind of texture, that superhero costume texture, that's retained from the actual series, so I really do like that. The arms are absolutely gigantic, putting him in the realm of like older cartoon characters and things that we used to see. Down here we have the kind of loincloth piece, kind of have the cool sort of Grayskull-esque symbol there. You can see there's H's on the gauntlet, and then down here at the boots, which are by far the most basic. They kind of have that swirly plastic to them, which, you know, love it or hate it, it is what it is. And on the back, we have another loincloth piece. It's funny because of how much copyright information they've crammed onto this thing. It really takes away from anything about making this seem like kind of just an unbroken sculpt. And it says Made in China very proudly on He-Man's belt there. There we have the bottoms of the shoes, which, believe it or not, do have some interesting sculpted detail. It looks like we have kind of the Castle Grayskull symbols going on, and there's different kind of little levels to the soles of the shoes. So I really like that, actually. So I think overall this is a fine look for the figure. Let's get one thing straight right away. This is not your He-Man or my He-Man from when we were growing up, or Classics or Origins or the original series. It's not even New Adventures. This is definitely its own thing. And this is meant clearly for the kids who enjoy this new series. And I've watched about the first half of it, and it's pretty good so far. So I was pretty impressed with it. But who knows, maybe I'll get into that in a future video. But this is a dead ringer for that. In terms of being a translation of what's in the show, it's great. However, if it's not your cup of tea and this isn't quite the look that you have in mind for He-Man, that's okay too. Then you don't have to pick the guy up. When it comes to articulation, there are a few little surprises. I definitely thought it would be less articulated than it is, so that's a good thing. The head can go down just a little bit and then up just a little. And then you can turn it pretty much all the way around, and the hair doesn't even get in the way all that much. It's pretty flexible, so that's not going to be an issue. You can cock the head a little bit side to side, so there's a little bit of that. You can bring it all the way around, and that's it. I wish more than anything, because this is the point I think that hurts it the most articulation-wise, I wish there were hinges up here on the shoulders. And there's just not, but that's okay. I know that this is more of the basic kind of figure. Down here at the wrists, you can just twist those, which I actually didn't expect it to have, so that was nice. Same for the other. Now this arm, you can of course go all the way, just like the other. And you can see down here that we do have a little bit of abdomen articulation. And honestly, what this feels like to me, and I know it's not constructed the same way, but what it feels like is the way that G.I. Joes used to work with O-rings, and it would kind of like snap back. That's what it feels like, and that's actually a really pleasant kind of sensation as you're playing with the figure. So I like it. It can't hold, you know, any pose like this unless you weight him down. The waist doesn't really do anything, but once again, you can use this up here to kind of compensate for that, but it just won't hold. We do have some hinges and swivels down here at the legs, so you can go out and get splits about this far. That's as much as He-Man, I think, would ever need to do. You can bring them in this much. You can have him kick out quite a ways. This doesn't impede it too much on the gray part, but just enough. Then there is no other articulation. You can't turn the boot. There's no kind of boot cut or anything like that. So I think overall it actually works pretty well for the intended design. So this is the new Power Sword, and I really like this design. Now they did have to compromise the design a little bit in two different ways. One is they had to add this peg so that they could put it in the back like I showed you earlier. The other way that it's kind of compromised is they sort of had to join the sword up in ways that it's really not joined up in the animation to make it one solid piece here. Really, it's supposed to be more like two blades, and they filled that in sculpting wise, which is fine. I totally understand it, but I really do like the design of the Power Sword, and it's one of my favorite things about the design work in the show. As you can see, both hands are sculpted where they can hold it easily, but we'll go ahead and put it in He-Man's right hand. You can see that it is a nice solid grip there. And now we can kind of go into where some of the action features start. With the abdomen up here at this top area, you can hold this hand up like this, and then he snaps forward. Same with to the side. Same with to the other side. Bring the blade down. As you can see, it's kind of just limited by your imagination about what angle you want him to go up at. And it, you know, your results may vary with a few of these, but I actually think this is really good, and it feels really solid. It doesn't feel like I'm going to break it. I wouldn't want to like twist it as hard as I could, and you know, of course the sword will go flying if you go too crazy like I was, but it's really a pretty tight grip, and I actually see this as being sort of a fun action feature for kids. And let's be clear, that's exactly what this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be like a play with it kind of toy, not necessarily a collector's toy. So that's what I'm getting from it anyway, and I can appreciate it for being that. Here's He-Man all posed up on the display stand that actually comes with Battle Cat and He-Man in battle armor with the new Target exclusive set. And he looks really cool. I actually think that with the kind of Starfield background and everything, that yeah, he looks pretty nice. But I'm really interested in seeing how he compares with other He-Man figures. In particular, I'd like to see what the size is like compared to an Origins figure. You can see that they're almost exactly the same height. They slightly, I guess, because this is much more of a pin-headed design and these heads are really big, it causes this guy to look taller than he probably actually is, and this guy to look shorter than he actually is. All in all, if the legs are posed out about the same way, then they're pretty much the same scale. So clearly this is intended to be your 5.5-inch kind of classic scale from the old figures. Now you may be wondering, like I was, can you change the heads out on these guys? I kind of pulled on this new one a little bit, and I think if you heated it up, it probably shouldn't be an issue, but it didn't really feel like it was supposed to come out of there, so I just let it be. So, you know, do it at your own risk. I'm sure it would look weird anyway. And of course, another scale of He-Man figure that's pretty popular lately is the Masterverse He-Man. But just so you can see, here he is in the back, and I don't have his legs bent probably like the other two guys are, but you can just get a very basic idea of how much taller he is, even standing in the back behind them. So there's no comparison between them. You know, you're not going to be able to really use them together in any sort of meaningful way. Even with the legs slightly bent like this, there's still just no way they can be used together. And just for fun, I always like to compare Masters of the Universe Classics, my favorite toy line of all time, with any new He-Man figure. So we'll go ahead and put our Filmation Masters of the Universe He-Man right there. And you can see that, of course, the scales are way out of whack, but it is funny to see two very disparate interpretations of He-Man as an animated cartoon character side by side. Definitely looks like this is more the George Hamilton, got a great tan kind of He-Man. So this leads to an interesting question. Is there a good Battle Cat you can pair with this guy? And by the time you're watching this video, well, they probably have released Battle Cat, but at the time of this recording, there is no Battle Cat, and they've not shown it yet. So let's just take an Origins Battle Cat. As expected, it really does work fairly well. Since these figures are both in about that 5.5-inch scale, I expected this to be a pretty good match, and sure enough it is. I think it looks pretty decent, and even from multiple angles it looks okay. He-Man's arms and kind of the body looks a little big, but you know, I think it does work pretty well. And just for fun, we'll take the absolutely massive Masterverse Battle Cat and we'll just see what that looks like. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Of course, Battle Cat is really big in the new CGI show, so maybe this is slightly more in line with that. But of course, you know, He-Man's a little small for this guy, but he sits on there just fine. Now, I have to say, I think this is a pretty fun figure, and for $10, I think that it's a pretty good value. This is cheaper than the Origins figures, and it's much cheaper than the Masterverse figures, making this about the cheapest He-Man figure that you can get, aside from the $1 Dollar Tree figures that are out there right now. With the amount of detail, and the paint apps, and the fun action feature, I actually think $10 is very reasonable for this guy. There are many people in the fan community that absolutely seem to hate this version of He-Man, and if you do, well, it's real simple. Point a kid towards it. You can just leave him right there in the aisle. I did think it was important to go ahead and do a review, change my mind on that, because I do think it's important to let the fans know whether this is worth their money or not. For me, yeah, I was pretty happy with my purchase. But don't make the same mistake I did and try to use that kind of general listing that was on Walmart's website and order 4 of them, because much like me, you'll get 4 He-Mans, probably, or 4 Skeletors. God forbid, 4 Man-at-Arms. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Good journey, Fanboy out.